Fine. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh God, it's great to be here. Thank you for the intro. So today I'm going to give you a talk about opinionated metrics informed development, basically. So who I am first, I'm an engineering manager in a team, in a fantastic team called Platform Insights. In this team, we have engineers, data scientists, user researcher, product managers. I'm going to explain why we need that. And basically, we provide data, metrics, insights to Spotify R&D in order to enable them to make data-informed decisions and improve speed and success. I have a strong bias for platform and developer productivity, and you're going to see that. So why? A few years ago, I was a product manager in a platform team, the continuous integration one. Of course, we wanted to be data informed, right? We wanted to be able to make the best decision. So we talked to the management and they wanted impact metrics. We talked to the users of the platform and they wanted to measure their own satisfaction. I talked to the team members and what they wanted is actionable metrics. For a very long time, we struggled to find a common ground. We needed to align product, business, tech, and it was kind of hard. So we wanted metrics that would speak for, like that everyone would understand. And it was kind of hard until I realized, well, that's actually the topic of that presentation. So let's go deep into it. Today, I'm going to present three things: a metric mental model we use, a metric journey, and some very common questions and concerns about the metrics we use. And just maybe I'm going to say a few words about productivity, because everyone seems to have an opinion these days. So let's start with the beginning, a metric mental model. So let's start with some pretty easy stuff, simple stuff. Metrics go from very leading to very lagging. The one that matters the most, the one that truly matters for companies is value creation. Of course, right? So we're talking about revenue, we're talking about monthly active users, we're talking about user satisfaction, etc., etc. So metrics tend to be low noise. I mean, they're not going to change dramatically from one day to the next. They also tend to move a bit slowly when you take action. I mean, if you improve build time, that's not going to change revenue the next day, will it? You can use them to make strategic plans from somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. And at time, they can be a bit tricky to measure. I mean, measuring value creation is kind of hard. User satisfaction can be expensive. And those metrics, as we can see, they can be influenced by a lot of factors. But let's go into the very leading ones to start with. Those ones are more like action-focused. What do we mean by that? If you make more pull requests, well, suddenly there are more pull requests. So the number of metrics, the number of pull request metric is going to go up. Those ones tend to be noisy. Day after day, they can change quite fast, of course. They tend to be actionable. If you ask a development team to enable, say, faster builds, then suddenly you're going to get, well, faster builds. Kind of easy. You work on it. Next one is like you can use them for tactical decisions, like a few weeks to a few months, I would say. Unfortunately, they tend to be gameable. So if you start to evaluate people based on those metrics, like the very leading one, well, that's going to be easy to game. And last, they can be easily, they can turn easily into vanity metrics. The one that look good, but don't actually create some value. But okay, let's take one step back here. It's actually a little bit more complex than that. So let's remember what I just said before. What truly matters at the end of the day is how much value we create in a fast way and sustainably. So let's take an example. We want to improve Spotify user satisfaction. That would be the kind of lagging one. In fact, you get a sort of a tree. For instance, you could say, well, if end users don't even perceive there can be an incident, or if we manage to fix them really quickly, that should improve Spotify user satisfaction. itself, it depends on software reliability, efficiency. Like you want SREs to be more efficient at fixing problems if there is any. And of course, these people will typically need to have logs available really quick. So, are there other metrics? Sure, there are. But for the purpose of that explanation, I'm going to go focusing on those ones. What matters here is that the graph, as you see it here, is the common understanding there is between the different functions in a company. They are connected with bets you make. What do I mean by bets? At a certain point in time, we collectively, product, tech, business, and so on, we collectively agree that the best thing to do to fix user satisfaction or to improve it would be, for instance, to improve or actually to reduce time to recovery from incidents. Those bets will change with time. That's fine, because the world will change, because the company will improve in some areas and then you switch to another area. That's fine. But this is really important to realize that in order to align your different functions in your company, you need this graph. One small aspect of that is that the leading one tend to be predictors for the lagging ones, meaning that if you change latency of log ingestion, that will eventually improve time to recovery, but with a time delay. We're going to talk about that a bit later. So to go a bit deeper into this one, as I said before, value-focused metrics are what matters at the end of the day for product, but they aren't actionable. Whereas the technical metrics, the one on the left, they matter to teams. They are a little bit less easy to relate to product value. There is no code base, for instance, for Spotify user satisfaction, but there is a code base for latency of log ingestions, right? So you want technical people to focus on the leading ones. In theoretically, we could measure the actual impact of the leading one on the lagging one. But that would require to do some internal A/B test. For instance, I don't know, make log ingestion a bit slower and see the impact. Actually, that would be weird, right? So at Spotify, internally, we've done some A/B tests, not on that topic, but we've done some internal A/B tests. It's kind of fun, but it takes a lot of time. And we typically don't have this time. So this is the reason why I call that bets and not necessarily knowledge. Right, at this point, though, you should react. Well, what do you mean by software reliability and efficiency? It's not like that's kind of a productivity kind of metric. What does that even mean? Is there a number for this one? Okay, thank you for asking. I'm going to address that topic a bit later in the presentation. But the short version is no, there is not a single number for that. So as a wrap-up, the graph is a common view of the world between the different functions in the company. The bets, they evolve with time, the connection between them. The product is more interested in the lagging ones, and actionable metrics is what matters if you want to take people to improve them. And you do not need actually to have everything perfectly measured all the time. We'll see that later. But first, I would like to go into another mental model, which also is important for us. Call that data, information, knowledge. What do we mean by that? Well, we believe that first you need to collect data, obviously, if you want to have good metrics in your understand your own productivity and how your company works. This data that come from system logs, like the CI environment, the pull request you create, the deployment, the supervision of things that you have. At Spotify, we collect that all the time, and we typically make that available for metrics on a daily basis. We also collect information from a very big survey, an internal one, that gives us a very comprehensive picture of the user experience as a developer at Spotify. We call that engineering satisfaction survey. Then, of course, on top of that, you can create metrics and dashboards. Note that those metrics and dashboards, they come with an opinion, whereas data does not come with an opinion. Those metrics and dashboards, they have customers, or they are like people looking at them. And at Spotify, the insights team, including mine, are in charge of providing this and making sure that people actually use them. Those internal metrics, any one of them is actually computed on a daily basis. And on top of that, you're going to have knowledge. Knowledge is going to come from quite advanced research, including user research, but also the research on data. This is where, for instance, if you see correlations between some metrics, you might want to see if there's a causality aspect as well. That's typically where we work, and we create quarterly reports, for instance, R&D productivity report. But why is it that I presented that? Actually, you would believe maybe that if you have good data, you can create good metrics, and if you have good metrics, you can create good knowledge. That would be simple, right? Well, the fact is, it's actually not how it works. So of course, you have data, you can be able to create metrics. For instance, TTR that you want to, or time to recovery from incidents. So if you have data about incidents, you can create this metric. Well, the fact is, in computer science, if you don't look at something, it's broken. So if you don't use your data, it's not good data. So what's going to happen really is that you will have to iterate. So you're going to collect information, for instance, about the build time of your CI, and then you're going to start, or you're going to collect information about your incidents, and then you can create on top of it, typically the TTR metric. And then you will realize your metric is really not good. The quality is really needs to be improved. And that's going to come back on data and enable people to do a better job. For instance, about the time to recovery, if you start making metrics about how long it takes to fix incidents, you will realize that people typically don't update the database. They don't open incidents when there are incidents, or they don't close them, or they don't tag them with the proper systems, or whatever. So if you have those metrics about TTR, suddenly your data is going to get better, and the usage of this centralized database for incidents is going to get better. So that's a cycle. Same thing with knowledge. If you start to go deep into the data and try to infer causality in some aspects, you will realize that the data is not good enough, or that your metrics actually don't cover the right things. And that's going to come back and say, hey, please fix this thing. Right, so you got customers for your metrics and your research. You have to iterate. You have to start small. You have to treat problems in metrics as incidents themselves. Does that ring a bell? Metrics are products. That's an important thing to realize. You actually probably need a product manager for that. The metrics you provide in your company, the metrics, they have customers. If no one looks at them, you should probably drop them. Or at least you could find a way for more people to look at them. This is really important. So to wrap up, metrics are products. Leading, influence, lagging. The graph of influence is a company alignment, and it will evolve with time, and that's okay. Let's go in the second part of this presentation, which is a metrics journey, and explain how to fix a problem. So in order to get this one, you probably need to be born before 1980, but anyway. So let's make a basic program. 10 is planning time for your OKRs. 20, well, we don't have good metrics just yet, do we? Because we just started. 30, well, we agree that we're going to track a metric except we don't have it. So we're just like, whatever. Development starts, right? We start the, say, 3-month cycle. And guess what? Because we don't have the metric, we don't really care. And then we ignore the work that's needed, go to 10. Right. How do we break that? How do we make it work? That's kind of the journey I would like to show you. So that's a simplified version of reality, what I'm going to go through, but it's kind of accurate. So the goal in our case is, okay, so the lagging one we want to go through is, let's improve development productivity. We always want to improve developer productivity, don't we? Right? And the thing about Spotify is that we actually run, as I said, an engineering satisfaction survey, which is very comprehensive, contains a lot of very important information. And thanks to that, we can identify the best thing to focus on. For the purpose of that example, I'm going to choose the client-side development productivity. So whatever you have on your iPhone, or your Android. So, because we read research and because we keep ourselves up to date, we know that the client developer satisfaction is actually a very big predictor and pretty good one for developer productivity. So we use the feedback we get from the developers. We actually use the research we read, and we know there are other factors, right? We know there are other things that can influence that, but for the purpose of that presentation, I'm going to go through this one. And just like quick one, this one is a screenshot of what we use internally at Spotify to collect. We collect a lot of like free text answers and a lot of qualitative, quantitative information about productivity, blockers, tasks, tools, everything. And this one is typically the free text search, and that enables you to see everything that people say about a given tool. In this case, Sprixie. Okay, so back to the case. We read the answers. We look at all the metrics related to self-reported productivity. And thanks to that, we can identify that there are like leading metrics to that we should probably focus on, because that's what people mention the most. And here we go with test flakiness and build time. Are there other factors that could influence developer satisfaction? Yeah, of course, there are more. Are we 100% sure to be successful? No, but pretty good. Was it successful to focus on that? Well, yes. So again, using internal information about what people say, using research, using all the qualitative information we get from the survey, we can track what people say about their productivity. And this one is the Android one. Overall, over the last 3 months, how productive have you felt? I know there is no scale, but that's on purpose. All right, so before we go there, the methodology is go from the lagging, agree as a company on which leading one to focus on, and then you can start iterating on actually collecting, as I said, like the build time and the test flakiness aspects. So now you know exactly what to focus on, and you don't have to boil the ocean and look at collecting all the information about everything. You can focus on those ones. Okay. Now I would like to say a word about productivity aspects. It's going to be short, and it could last for like 30 minutes, but I won't. There's a few things which I think are really important to realize here. And again, we should never forget that productivity is all about doing the right things, focusing on the right product, doing it fast and consistently and sustainably. In fact, we don't really have the one metric. It doesn't exist. Even 5 metrics are not good enough to cover the entire user experience and the entire productivity. But what we do have is a number of proxy metrics that we can use. So there are like the action-based or output, outcome, the value-based. Like I won't go into the detail of all that, but it's kind of important to contextualize everything that you collect. You cannot compare the productivity of a team which is mostly focused on the back-end side and the productivity of people who are doing, say, data or machine learning or client-side development. So metrics are going to be vastly different, and that's okay. But what matters actually is the trends. Like you want people to have good conversations as to like, hey, why are my metrics going down? Why are my metrics going up? And again, because you have like 5 or 10 of them, you can have like interestingly realize that maybe you have a better deployment frequency, but the quality goes down, or they will compensate each other. So again, contextualizing is important, and what truly matters is that you want people to have good conversations, productive conversations, to be able to identify why their metrics are going up or down, and maybe you can benefit from some other teams that has better metrics than you. So another aspect of bot metrics is that, as I mentioned, we do self-reported metrics from the surveys we have. And an important bit of that is that if you ask people, trust what they tell you. Like if people tell you that the build time takes 10 minutes and you believe it takes 5, it's because it takes 10. Like it's like, my point here is that if your log metric tells you it takes 5, but for some reason, it takes 5 minutes for them to be notified that the build is done. Well, then it took 10, effectively, right? So like people will, if you ask people about their experience, they will tell you, they will be honest, and you will get the big picture. You will understand the full picture, what happens. Whereas if you go with only log data, you will only see a small part, which is probably more technically accurate, but doesn't quite get the full picture. All right, so now I would like to address some very common questions we get and concerns, I'll say. Let's start with the first one, but I hear that a lot, right? What about data quality? Well, I mentioned that. I'm afraid your data is not going to be good. It's not going to be of good quality until you start using it. So again, incidents, obviously, but even build time and anything else, you will realize your data is not a very good quality until you start making metrics and looking into that and having dashboard and questioning why it's going up and down. That's the time when you will realize you can fix it. Can we trust what people say about self-reported metrics? So I have, I don't know, maybe 3 answers to that. Yes, yes, and yes. It's kind of important to track over time what people tell you. And I've realized that people are surprisingly accurate at telling you about tooling usability, perceived self-reported productivity, the blockers they face, the product directions they get, and so on. As I mentioned before, perception is really important. And if someone tells you that their user experience is good or not so good, they are probably right. This metric does not cover every case. So that's something you get a lot. So when people feel that they're going to be, say, evaluated based on the metric, they start to question the metric because maybe it doesn't cover all the use cases that they face. Well, that's true. Unfortunately, I would say live with it and don't evaluate people based on metrics. So that's another story, which I'm going to cover a bit later. This metric is flawed in some way. Let's repeat this one. All metrics are flawed in some kind of way, like all of them, right? And it's okay, live with it. Like it's fine. You can still, if you see that something goes up or something goes down, that's always a good start for a good conversation to try to go deeper and understand what's going on really for your developers. My metric depends on external factors I don't control. That's kind of an interesting one. So let's say you're in charge of, say, the build system and you want to optimize build time. Well, you're not the one writing the code itself, right? So you could argue, I cannot have a metric that tracks build time because, well, the code itself will change. So how can I be responsible for that or what? Well, I'm sorry, but that's how the world is. Maybe what we need to do then is not only focus on, say, the compiler or something, but also focusing on, say, educating people on how to make better code or having better alerting if someone makes a change that dramatically changes the build time or things like that. You have to think different. So you got to if you're in charge of moving a metric, say build time, this is your role to kind of look at all the aspects of that, not only the compiler part. Now, you're going to have OKRs, and typically OKRs come with metrics attached to them, right? Well, yes. Typically, in a company, the more people you have, the company level are going to be OKRs typically based on the more lagging metrics. So if you have a department in between, there's probably going to be, say, something in between. So take an example, customer satisfaction, maybe shorter TTR in the middle. And for the team itself, you might have log ingestion latency, as I mentioned, to take the example like that. Important, though, is that you want the metrics themselves to be sensitive to the change you're going to make. Of course, as I mentioned before, with this graph, you want them to be aligned with the value creation. And kind of goes without saying, but if you make an OKR on 3 months, but it takes you 3 months to collect the data that you need for that metrics, that's kind of going to be difficult. So last but not least, you're not asking for a perfect match. So you can go into endless discussions as to hey, this metric is not good because it doesn't capture all the values that I create in the coming 3 months. That's okay. That's fine. You don't need to cover everything, but you need to be smart and explain what's happening. All right, so now about like who's accountable. I would say that's kind of important to realize that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today, so start today. You probably want to, like if you start today, you probably want to start collecting the data and the metrics for the OKR that you had, like basically the last 3 months or the last 6 months, because the odds are that's going to be needed in the coming 3 months anyway, right? So remember that the metrics are here to help you focus on the right things. And as a consequence, product people typically want to prioritize that in the same way that we need to prioritize some work on the tech health, for instance, or tech debt. All right, and most importantly, maybe, is that senior management, you need to set the tone and like be a role model here. Like talk about metrics, review them, talk about them, explain what's important and why they care about, and so on and so forth. As I mentioned, if a metric is not looked at, it's broken. That's true for dashboard. That's true for everything. So as a consequence, you really want to make sure if you create metrics that there will be people caring about them. All right, we know that. When is it that someone wrote this? Yeah, when was that? Okay, 1975. Most of you were not born. It's probably about time that we learn something from it. So almost 50 years, okay? Note that I actually don't agree, like I added this like for someone to benefit from the metrics looking good, right? So the point here is not a bad thing in itself, in my opinion. That's my opinion now, to have goals for metrics, but it is a bad thing to evaluate people individually because then they will game the metrics, right? So it's not a bad thing to tell a team like, hey, please improve your deployment frequency or please improve, I don't know, something else. But it would be a bad thing that people feel they're going to be evaluated based on that. All right, so maybe I like to put it this way. Metrics are here to help us, not the other way around. In most difficult conversations that I've seen, it's mostly because there's a premise that is kind of unsaid, but everyone believes, is that people will be evaluated based on those metrics. And that's where most of the confusion comes from. So as soon as you start evaluating people based on metrics that exist, that will completely kill your efforts, and that's probably not what you want. And last but not least, it's kind of getting nerdy here. Is that a graph left to right? No, actually, it's not entirely true. But like every mental model, it's not here to be perfect. It's here to help you make the right decisions, right? So it's still helpful. So in this case, for instance, if you push too hard on velocity, like if you push really, really hard, what happens is that technical debt is going to go up. And as a consequence, the velocity will go down. So if you truly want to get nerdy, it's actually a system of differential equations. We can talk about that if you want, but you typically don't need that. So that's fine. All right, so what did we go through? A metric mental model, a metrics journey, and some common questions and concerns. As a wrap-up, I'd like to mention that important is to align product, engineering, and business. Metrics are product. Deal with them. You can start with surveys and then build your data, information, knowledge stack. I'd like to mention that at Spotify, we actually externalize the engineering satisfaction survey we have as a Pulse plugin for Backstage. So feel free to contact me or the company based on that. Thank you very much.